People want to have speeches. Now that's cool. Just keep it short. And I'd prefer to have questions rather than speeches, but you know, if you really feel like it and you want to have a cup of tea while you do it, then please do.
You know, what's going on in Israel in terms of repression against democracy and against leftists? There was a publication recently pushed calling for Israel to build death camps for rabbis who weren't radical and extremist enough. You know, the Knesset is repressing left-wing groups. There's official segregation now in Israeli housing. You know, is there any hope for those of us who want to see a peaceful solution? You know, is there any hope left in Israel, or is this just gone so extremist, so far over the edge that there's no way to bring it back?
Thank you. Thank you for your question. Did everyone hear the question, or should I repeat that? I'll repeat it. Right. The question referred to the onslaught of repression against political opposition within Israel that starts from Palestinians, citizens of Israel, and has slowly and gradually moved also to Israeli citizens of Israel, Jewish citizens of Israel like myself. And the other part of the question was, in an era or in a time where racism seems to be on the rise in Israel, do we still have any hope? So let me answer this one by one. Let me start by saying that a recent poll by the Israeli Center for Democracy revealed some startling data. The majority, and I'm talking over 2/3, of Jewish Israelis my age, that is people under 30, thought that there should be a formal, juridical, political, social, and economic separation of Jews and non-Jews in Israel. For all of you apologists of Israel, answer to me please, in which country where 2/3 of young people my age say they will not live next to a non-Jew, particularly a Palestinian, where they believe that non-Jews should be deprived of their basic civil rights and citizenship? And recall here, guys, this is a poll of the Israeli Center for Democracy, not a Palestine group. It's an Israeli internal survey done by Jews. Okay? So most young Israelis think there should be public separation, segregation. So let's do this. Let's put this within the context of the United States. If 2/3 of the people listening to me right now thought that African Americans and white folks should be separated publicly, what would we call it? I mean, I think you got the answer. And I think there was an answer to this decades ago when folks went down south to ride buses against segregation. In a sense, black population in the southern United States under segregation were also an invisible nation of sorts. What we see in Palestine is merely a replay of that very policy of ethnic segregation. Do we have hope? I'm an optimistic person. I think we do have hope. But this hope for a better future depends on all of us. And what do I mean by that? This goes back to your other part in your question about repression. The more insecure Israel becomes in its policies of ethnic and racial segregation, as there is mounting pressure internationally against it to end these policies, the more radical its politics of repression, of internal opposition becomes. This means not that we should shy away from opposition, from intellectual debate, and practical resistance on the ground. It means precisely the opposite. It means that if any of us, if all of us want to have a better future, we need to stand up and we need to pressure Israel to end its policies. We inside of Israel need to raise our voices and stand with our Palestinian brothers and sisters in the struggle for liberation. Without which, I'm afraid, we will end up, and that might be provocative, in a situation where ethnic cleansing once again becomes a plausible option on the table, We saw this play out once in 1948, when over 500 Palestinian villages were demolished by the Israeli authorities, their population dispersed into different countries. And it seems to me that today, what we saw during Cast-Leigh operation in Gaza in the late 2008, early 2009, is merely the beginning of what can happen soon. And let me propose or suggest that as Palestinian non-violent grassroots mobilization against occupation is going to gain momentum, or is gaining momentum, it becomes more and more plausible that we'll see another Israeli intervention in Gaza in order to distract the world's attention from Palestinian popular resistance and shift it to another feud of blood. Do we have hope? Yes, we do. It's up to us. But what does repression against Israeli Jews within the country means? It means that a system so insecure at its root, that knows that its professed democratic values do not hold, are not congruent in relation to its practice on the ground, becomes more and more insecure and more violent against its opposition as facts become clear and as more and more people around the world raise their voices against the system of apartheid. Yes?
Okay, thank you. Matan, I have a question. A recent poll of East Jerusalem residents prefer Israeli citizenship over Palestinian. It says over here, I got a source.
I know the poll. Yep.
Survey held ahead of the Palestinian bid for statehood finds that 35% of East Jerusalemites would opt to remain Israelis, and 40% would like to move to Israel if their neighborhood became part of Palestine. What do you say to this? I'm confused.
Thank you. It's a great question. What I say to this is something very simple. When we talk about apartheid, it means that you segregate populations according to ethnicity, and within the ethnic group known as Palestinians, you divide them into different groups, to each you allot different rights and different obligations. That was the system of Bantustans in South Africa. In Israel, how it manifests itself is that in Gaza, people basically have no rights whatsoever. They're under a complete siege for years now. In the West Bank, as long as there's a Palestinian authority which would collaborate with Israel's occupation and sort of manage the policing of Palestinian resistance for Israel, then those folks will have a bit more rights. They'll have relative freedom of movement nowadays. And folks living in Jerusalem, by the way, occupied under international law, are given a bit more rights. What does this mean? They're not citizens of Israel, they're permanent residents of Israel. This means that they have more rights than their brothers in the West Bank, who have more rights than their brothers and sisters in the Gaza Strip. So it's not surprising, then, that people would like to live where they have more rights. Now, if the alternative of those folks that you're mentioning, right, is to live between Jerusalem, where not citizens are not equal to Israeli Jews by no means, but they still don't live under as dire conditions as their brothers and sisters in the West Bank and Gaza.
Under Palestinian leadership, under the UN...
This isn't a conversation.
It's okay, guys.
There's a UN bid for statehood.
Yeah.
And the bid is for Palestinian...
Thank you. Let me finish.
So under a Palestinian
Yeah.
leader, they would rather,
Yep.
what this is saying is they would rather live under Israeli democratic leadership
Yep.
than Palestinian leadership.
Great.
Why is that? I'm confused.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much for your clarification. Great. Well, the question then would be, I'll get to you in a second, sir. The question then will be very simple. What would this Palestinian state proposed look like? Because it seems to me that the Palestinian state professed right now would look precisely like Gaza, allegedly sovereign on the inside, besieged from the outside. If you look at what the wall has done under the guise of security, but now Israel, of course, is talking about making the borders of the wall the permanent wall of a Palestinian state, is to carve out Palestinian populations and territories so that they are divided one from the other, besieged from all sides, as Israel will remain in control of all borders. This is the Israeli propositions when we talk about a state. On the east and all around, where the resources are under Israeli control, so on and so forth. Under these conditions, I wouldn't be surprised that people would want to live in Israel. Now, let me tell you something else. Let's take it at face value and say they want to live in one democratic state. I'm a big fan of a one democratic state. Are you? Because if you are, you'll say, welcome. You should live with us. After all, this was how apartheid in South Africa ended. Black, whites, and other ethnic and racial groups lived together in one state. So if we do that, let me ask you this.
I was born in South Africa and there were no bombs. I was born in South Africa.
The ANC blew up buses, my dear. I'm sorry to tell you that.
You know what? I was born in 1970. I emigrated to the United States in 1980.
Yeah.
And I was a very proud South African when the apartheid laws were lifted. And I will tell you that I grew up never in bomb shelters. And I grew up never fearing that if I stepped on a bus, I was going to be blown up.
Well, that's a simple question of Islam. If you go read a simple book about apartheid in South Africa, or even go read Nelson Mandela's biography, kind of the leader of the anti-apartheid movement, Nelson Mandela would tell you how the ANC blew up buses in South Africa. So I'm sorry, just historically inaccurate. But, and this is not to condone this, but to say that the whole comparison to Gandhi and the whole illusion as if struggles against colonialism and apartheid were non-violent is not true historically. The Algerians, in order to overthrow French colonialism, were violent. So did the ANC. But let me just say this very simply. Great, I agree with everything you say. And I'm glad we can come to this agreement. Do you support a democratic state? One state, not two, one democratic state where all people, regardless of their race, ethnicity, or religion, are absolutely equal. If so, we're on the same page. Ahlan wa sahlan fiki. Great. You're welcome. The problem is that if you go back and recall what I just said about the pulse of the state of racism in Israel, then you see that over 2/3 of Jewish Israelis think Palestinians should not have rights at all. Now, what does it tell you? I'm gonna... Wait. Oh, yo, take it one at a time, guys.
I was really glad to hear you reference the segregation that was in this country against
Amen.
black folks, right? And the reason is so that I can tell you that during that period of time, there was an element within the black community that felt that we should do this thing violently. Of course, you know, the other side were pacifists and said it was nonviolent.
Right.
I can tell you that those that advocated violence were wrong. And those that advocate violence in this situation is wrong. Now, I have a question for you. I would like to know where I can go to see archaeological artifacts of this indigenous Palestinian people.
You can go to Silwan in Jerusalem. You can go to Safuri up north. You can go to Akka. You can go to Jaffa. You can go to Jerusalem. Guys, wait. Guys, no, shut. I'm answering. Alright, my man, wait, let me.
No, listen. You're telling me that I got to travel halfway across the world. If I wanted to look up the Sumerians, you could give me a website. If I wanted to look up ancient Israel, you could give me a website. Give me a website where I can look.
I'm giving you actual sites. You want to go to a website?
Yeah, whatever.
I mean,
a book. Give me a book. Where can I go to see archaeological artifacts?
There's a great book, actually just came out about archaeology and its role in Zionist propaganda. Nadia Al-Haj, professor at Columbia University Center for Middle Eastern Studies. Go check it. Now, as for a question about African Americans, segregation. I'm answering your question, so first of all, thank you very much for your question. Appreciate it. I'm trying to answer that question. Wait. The question of violence and non-violence is a difficult one, but let me just say, wait, my man, let me answer. Right? My man, let me just answer, okay? I've been engaged in a non-violent struggle, yes, for the last 8 years. You want a website? Go to the website of the Bil'ain Popular Committee and see what non-violence looks like on the ground. Go to any of 27 villages in the West Bank that currently are resisting non-violently the occupation under which they live. Go see that. I'm I'm very serious. I would be happy to show you where they are. But let me just point this, my man. Why is it we never ask Israelis where are their Gandhis? Why is it that we ask the oppressed for their Gandhis? Now, this to me is racially tainted from the get-go. We never ask my brother who served in the Israeli army in Gaza why he was not being non-violent.
They're all in Auschwitz.
No, my brother is not in Auschwitz. Half my family was murdered in Auschwitz. My brother is not, thank God. But,
That's where the Jewish Gandhis are.
well,
In debt with your parents. Wow.
and sadly so. But you know what? I want to take this provocation. I want to take it very, very seriously. More seriously than you folks take it. What is the lesson we take from an historical period where people massacred, butchered, killed other people for who they were ethnically, racially, and religiously defined?
That's going on right now in Egypt.
Wait. What we do with this, and this is something that a Jewish writer, Hannah Arendt, wrote right after the war. She herself was a Jew who fled Germany under Nazi prosecution. She said this: the tragedy of Israel is that the only political solution people could come up with is one where one stateless people made another stateless. This is the predicament of this situation. The result to this, my friend, is not to go and say Auschwitz, Auschwitz, Auschwitz all day as means to support an ongoing oppression of other people. The lesson me and my family take from this history of enslavement, history of racial segregation, and of murder of my people is to say never again, but not never again only for us. Never again for anyone on this planet who is subject to inhumane conditions, to a perpetual occupation, and to an apartheid system.
As a result of terrorism. Thank God for democracy and all the Arabs in the world living in democracy. Of those in
I answered your question. You don't have to shout. You don't have to shout. Right? And again, for all of you here in praise of Israeli democracy, ladies and gentlemen, let me say it very bloody clearly. You want democracy? Be my guest. I'm a Democrat. Are you willing to have a democratic state where everyone, Jews and non-Jews alike, are equal citizens? If you are, you're more than welcome to join this struggle, because this is what the struggle is for. But if you're for democracy for Jews only, then you are not welcome. Thank you. I'm trying to go to the other side for a sec.
Of course. Jews and Christians and Hindus
Wait.
are being persecuted
Have a question?
throughout the world. And Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East.
Yes, my friend. Speak up, man.
We often hear very similar types of rhetoric from anti-Zionist speakers, and a lot of the words that are used are typically on this board. So I just wanted to say that thanks to local Zionist donors, every time that you mentioned a word on this board, we're donating money to the Hand in Hand School.
Apartheid.
Yes. Which benefits both
Wall occupation, yeah.
and Jews. They're educated together.
Zionist struggle, wall, IDF. It's not IDF, it's IOF, Israeli Occupation Forces. And boycott. Boycott is a very good word. Good.
Interesting him.
And so,
Is there a question?
I would like to finish when
Do you have a question?
I wanted to say that we have now raised over $700 for this school, and
Is that a question?
Your speech has actually contributed to something going towards peace.
Great, thank you.
Today.
Please, my friend. Yeah.
Okay, you were here a couple months ago, Steve.
Yes, I was, sir.
in the audience. And you mentioned that you took part in disrupting the speech of Bibi Netanyahu in
Yes, I did, sir.
New Orleans, okay, with the Jewish Voice for Peace.
Mm-hmm.
You also made a statement that people who, if Jewish students on the campus or any pro-Israeli supporters on the campus felt uncomfortable or intimidated, that was tough. You also said that people who defended Israel deserve to be disrupted because whatever they said is useless discourse. You use that term, useless discourse.
Is there a question?
Over again. It sounds Trotskyite to me. So I'd like for you to to explain to this audience, especially these protesters,
Yes.
why they don't have the right to say what they say. You are not disrupted today. We have a healthy debate. You are not disrupted. I'd like you to explain to them how you, as an Israeli, come to the United States and tell us who does not have the right to speak. Where do you get off doing that?
Thank you. Let me take a couple more questions together and then I'll answer this, okay? Anyone else? Got your hands up. Yes.
You know, I've got a lot of Jewish friends and I've got Jewish family. And when I think of people claiming that Judaism is about inflicting harm on other human beings and saying that that's okay and that's kosher, it makes me really fucking angry. Because I think of my Jewish lovers, my Jewish friends, my Jewish family, and they would never ever want to harm anyone else. They would never go out of their way. They would never leave LA to go to some other country and steal someone's land. And I just wonder how it makes you feel as a Jew to be surrounded by these radical apologists for Israeli terrorism.
Thank you. Can we take a last one and I'll answer all three? Anyone else? Up here. You? Yes, you.
So in Hebrew, the name of your organization is Anarchistes Neged Hagadeh.
Aywa.
For all the people who don't speak Hebrew, that means anarchists against the fence, not
Yes.
the wall.
Yes.
So I'm really curious why in Hebrew you decide to call it a fence, and why in English it's called a wall, and why you've stood up here and probably said over 100 times the word wall. Is it because you know that Israelis know that it's not a wall and know that the majority of it is a fence, and so that they would probably call you out on it if you did call it a wall?
Let me ask you something.
No, I'm very curious. It's the name of your
No,
organization.
good.
Right?
Thank you. You're right. Yeah.
Fence.
Let me ask you. What does either a wall or a fence stand for? It stands for... Wait.
Security.
Yes. Thank you. Wait,
One is
guys.
permanent, and
Wait,
one
wait.
is not.
Answer a question.
I'm
One
trying
is
to answer.
permanent,
My friend,
one is
I'm
not.
answering your question. Okay,
That's
ma'am?
different.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. First of all, who said fences cannot be permanent? I've never heard of that before. If you see the fence, it can actually be very permanent. What matters is... Actually, we start with two names. Anarchists Against the Wall and Against the